So in the first episode of this series, which should be linked below, I identified the 4 primary positions I think United should be targeting in the summer transfer window. Those positions were at goalkeeper, right back, central midfield and centre forward. If you want a more in-depth analysis of what United actually needs specifically, the key traits and attributes for any player they bring in for those positions, check out that video as I said. But in this video I will be specifically analysing the central midfielder that I think United should sign, going over a few different options and ultimately coming to a conclusion on which one is the best. I'll be specifically looking at the premium central midfield options, and then in a separate video, and then in the second part to this central midfield video I'll look at some alternative better value for money options, before I then weigh up overall who United should sign. So the first option for Manchester United that I'm going to be analysing is Enzo Fernandez. Fernandez was already on the radar of some major clubs in Europe prior to his £12 million move to Benfica from River Plate in the summer. But despite being at Benfica for only just over half a season now, the 22-year-old Argentine is reportedly going to command a fee in excess of £100 million, with Chelsea being told this January that in order to sign him they would have to stump up the release clause in his contract, which is £105 million or 120 million euros. And whilst I think everyone would pretty much agree that this is massively overinflated, after watching him for Benfica and for Argentina at the World Cup, I can see why Benfica are slapping such an incredible price tag on him, particularly with his contract expiring in 2027. In terms of what type of central midfielder Enzo Fernandez is, I think he can play a number of different roles in that central midfield position to a very high standard, as I would regard him as an all-round central midfielder, being a player that provides a lot both in and out of possession. He's got the tenacity, aggression and tackling ability of a traditional ball-winning central midfielder, having the physicality and athleticism to move across the pitch and snuff out the danger with his sliding and standing tackles. And we definitely saw this at the World Cup, as Enzo Fernandez recorded the most amount of tackles completed of any central midfielder in the tournament with 3.6 per 90. He is very front foot in his defensive style, moving out to close down opposition players, recording a tackle success rate of around 70%, and so this style of player should definitely suit Ten Hag's aggressive pressing system, pushing up in the final third and applying pressure to players as United look to win the ball high up the pitch. He's not as efficient when it comes to his ability to make interceptions, so this is definitely a part of his game that he can improve, but he is only 22 years old and it is very rare for such young players to have this reading of the game, and so I definitely wouldn't class it as a weakness in his game, and overall he's a very good ball winner, and would certainly be a massive improvement defensively on Christian Eriksen, Fred and McTominay. In possession he's very efficient with his passing, receiving the ball and always looking for a forward pass. He's got the ability to play short sharp passes in congested areas alongside flicks that enable his side to play out of pressure, something that Ten Hag definitely needs from any central midfielder brought in to partner Casemiro. And we can see just how good Fernandez's creative passing ability is when we look at his FBref report. Now keep in mind, because Fernandez plays in Liga NOS, this is not compared against Europe's top 5 leagues, it's compared over the last 365 days against every other midfielder in the next 8 top leagues in world football. But despite that, you can't take away how impressive these numbers are. He ranks in the 99th percentile for his overall progressive passes, his passes into the final third, as well as his short, medium and long passes completed, whilst also recording an exceptionally high pass completion rate for all of those as well. He ranks in the 90th percentile for his overall assists, the 94th for his XG assisted, the 98th for his expected assists, and the 95th for his key passes as well, showing that Fernandez is an exceptional progressor of the ball in terms of playing passes into the final third and into the box, whilst overall just being a very good passer in general, whether this is short, medium or long passes, and he also has the ability to create chances when in the final third as well. Now he doesn't quite have the same ball carrying ability as other players that I will mention later on in the video, ranking only in the 48th percentile for his dribbles attempted, but other than that I think you'd have to say he excels in pretty much every other area, with him also ranking in the 96th percentile for his non-penalty XG and the 72nd percentile for his non-penalty goals. And so from this statistical analysis I would conclude that in order to get the best out of Enzo Fernandez, it's best to have him deployed as a box-to-box midfielder, utilising his ball-winning ability when out of possession in those deeper areas of the field to win the ball back, whilst also using it as an offensive weapon when in the press. But you also want him getting forward, being able to create chances via his through balls and crosses into the box, and allow him to make forward runs ahead of play to get into goal scoring positions himself. And so this is why I would compare him to someone like Steven Gerrard or Arturo Vidal. who, unlike players like Christian Eriksen, Fred and McTominay, is a central midfielder without any significant weaknesses and isn't just good but excels at all the key areas you would want from a central midfielder. Now I will discuss whether United should actually sign him considering his price tag, but we'll come on to that at the end once I've analysed some of the other options. So another premium central midfield option would be Frankie de Jong. De Jong is slightly older and more experienced than Enzo Fernandez, being 26 in May, but he's still a player who has not yet hit his peak, and like Enzo Fernandez, I do think he can be one of the best central midfielders in world football. However, he is a different type of central midfielder to Enzo Fernandez. Fernandez is much more of an all-round central midfielder, as I previously discussed. He does rank in the 92nd and the 98th percentile for the percentage of dribblers he's tackling, as well as the amount of times he's been dribbled past, respectively. And so what this shows is that when de Jong does go into a tackle, he is usually successful. But unlike Fernandez, who's very front foot, always looking to contest plays with the ball, de Jong is very standoffish, being the type of player to sit deeper and hold his position rather than move out and contest players with the ball. Now certainly alongside a ball winner like Casemiro, I don't think this is a huge problem. I would however like to see him improve his reading of the game and up his interceptions, as he only ranks in the 51st percentile for that metric, and so I definitely think he does need to develop his reading of the game, as his ability to cut out passes will definitely compensate for his lack of tackling ability. But as I said, Frankie de Jong and Enzo Fernandez are two different types of central midfielders. De Jong is what I would class as a roaming playmaker, and as we can see here, he ranks very highly for his short passes, being the type of player who's very good at linking and progressing play via a series of short passes in congested areas, and he is also a very good long passer, completing around 82% of his long passes, which ranks in the 96th percentile. But like Enzo Fernandez, he also provides a creative threat higher up the pitch. He ranks in the 87th percentile for his passes into the final third, the 89th for his passes into the penalty area, and the 86th for his progressive passes in general, and this is obviously compared against Europe's top 5 leagues. And combine this with his ball carrying and dribbling ability, where he ranks in the 88th percentile for the amount of dribbles he's completed, and he also has a 75% dribble success rate, ranking in the 98th percentile, showing that when de Jong does attempt to dribble, 3 out of 4 times he is successful. Now before I compared Enzo Fernandez to someone like Arturo Vidal or Steven Gerrard, but I would compare Frankie de Jong to someone like Andres Iniesta, having the dribbling, close ball control, and burst of acceleration to glide past players in central congested areas, making him hugely press resistant, something that can be extremely valuable in the build-up phase. With United looking to build up from the back, de Jong can receive the ball with his back to goal under pressure, swivelling away from opposition players and allowing United to play out of the press, which subsequently will allow them to exploit the space further up the pitch. Now like Frankie de Jong and Enzo Fernandez, the next player is also a premium option, and it is Jude Bellingham, who like Enzo Fernandez is going to cost around the £100 million mark. But like with the Argentine, the hype around Bellingham is well deserved. He is younger than Enzo Fernandez, still being only 19, 20 by the summer, and he is definitely a lot more similar to Enzo Fernandez than he is to Frankie de Jong, having the athleticism and physicality combined with both the offensive and defensive ability to be considered a truly all-round central midfielder, a player who would definitely flourish playing as a box-to-box midfielder as Fernandez would. Whereas Frankie de Jong is probably what I would define as a sole Cruyffian midfielder, who would probably struggle if he was used in a different type of system and a different type of style. Both Bellingham and Fernandez are perfect modern day central midfielders, very adaptive to different styles, and having such a wide and varied attribute list that they can play in so many different roles in that central midfield position. Now Bellingham isn't as good as either Fernandez or de Jong in terms of his progressive passing, as he's not the type of central midfielder that is a deep line playmaker who's going to sit in front of the opposition's midfield line, utilising his passing range to switch play and find incisive passes into players between the lines. Instead, he's a lot more dynamic, able to receive the ball and inject pace into the attack, playing quick 1-2s and driving the attack forward with the ball at his feet. The fundamental difference between Bellingham and de Jong is that de Jong is much better in congested areas, able to use his intricate dribbling ability to manoeuvre past players who are pressing him, whereas Bellingham's ball carrying ability comes from when he's able to burst into space, being a much more athletic dribbler. And whilst I did say that Bellingham is much more similar to Enzo Fernandez than de Jong, the Argentine and the Englishman do differ, as Enzo Fernandez is much more of a progressive passer, whereas Bellingham progresses the ball via carrying it forward with the ball at his feet. And therefore, I would say that Enzo Fernandez is much better in deeper areas in front of the opposition's midfield line, whereas Bellingham has to be given the freedom to push further forward and break in behind the opposition's midfield line. And at the end of the video, I will come on to which style of player I think would suit Ten Hag's system better. When we look at Jude Bellingham's FB ref report, we can definitely see that he's not a deeper line playmaker, and is more of a box-to-box midfielder, or at least a player who should be moving into advanced areas more often. He ranks around the 50th to 60th percentile for his short, medium and long passing metrics, and also sitting in the 65th percentile for his passes into the final third, showing that when it comes to his passing ability alone and his ability to progress the ball into the final third via his progressive passes, Bellingham is still good, but he's not at the level that Enzo Fernandez or Frankie de Jong are. But Bellingham certainly comes into his own as we move further up the pitch, ranking in the 88th percentile for his passes into the penalty area and the 80th percentile for his overall progressive passes, as well as sitting in the 83rd percentile for his XG assisted and the 75th percentile for his expected assists as well. Factor in that Bellingham ranks in the 90th percentile for his non-penalty XG, and the 94th percentile for his non-penalty goals, and also overperforms his non-penalty XG by 0.07 per 90. And you can see that Bellingham isn't just a central midfielder who's going to do most of his work in the middle third, but he's going to be a player to offer a goal scoring and goal creating threat as he moves into the final third as well. And another premium central midfield option would be Nicolo Barella from Inter Milan. Out of the three that I've previously mentioned, Barella is probably most similar to Frankie de Jong, with both players being in their mid-20s, 25, 26 at the end of the season, and with both offering a lot more creatively in possession than they do out of possession. Like de Jong, Barella is a fantastic technical central midfielder, having the press resistance to swivel out of pressure and drive the play forward. Now I will say Barella isn't as good as Frankie de Jong at doing this. I do think de Jong is one of the best central midfielders in the world at evading pressure and carrying the ball through the centre of the pitch. But Barella does still have this ability, and I do think in terms of his ability to link play with a series of short passes in a congested area, he is better than either Enzo Fernandez or Jude Bellingham. However, I do think Enzo Fernandez and Jude Bellingham do provide substantially more out of possession than Barella or even Frankie de Jong does, and so I would categorise Bellingham and Enzo Fernandez more as all-round box-to-box central midfielders, whereas de Jong and Barella are mostly roaming playmakers. When you look at the defensive section of Barella's FB Ref report, you can see that he's definitely not as good out of possession as he is when his side have the ball. However, Barella really comes into his own in the final third, being the player out of these four premium options who offers the most in terms of chance creation. And we can see this as Barella ranks in the 90th percentile for his overall progressive passes, the 98th percentile for his passes into the penalty area, the 90th percentile for his expected assists, and the 93rd percentile for his XG assisted. Add on to this the fact he ranks in the 83rd percentile for his non-penalty XG and the 93rd percentile for his non-penalty goals, overperforming his non-penalty XG by 0.08 per 90. And you can see that Barella, like someone like Bellingham, offers a huge amount not just in the middle third when progressing the ball forward, but also when it comes to creating and scoring goals. He reminds me a lot of someone like Luka Modric, having that low centre of gravity, being able to drive the attack forward in the middle third, but in the final third he's got the vision and awareness and ability to play a through ball with the correct weight of pass and timing. And so whereas players like Enzo Fernandez and Frankie de Jong specialise in moving the ball from the middle to the final third, I think Barella is a type of central midfielder who specialises in then creating once the ball is in the final third. And despite not being as good defensively as Bellingham or Enzo Fernandez, he's definitely an improvement on Christian Eriksen, having a lot more athleticism and tenacity to his game. And just as Luka Modric dramatically improved the defensive side of his game as he got older, turning into an all-round central midfielder, I do think that Nicolo Barella could do the same. I also think that given that we have seen Ten Hag instruct Christian Eriksen to move up from the double pivot alongside Casemiro to now playing almost alongside Bruno Fernandes, sitting between the lines of the opposition system and being one of those players to pick up positions in the half space, this could definitely suit Nicolo Barella. And I do think that out of the four central midfielders I've analysed in this video, Barella probably is best suited to playing that more advanced role and pushing up between the lines, as he's one touch in to play with his back to goal with his little flicks and movement, means that he's going to be excellent at linking the play around the box and subsequently moving the ball into dangerous positions. But Barella isn't a defensive liability either. He's got the athleticism, tenacity and aggression that Christian Eriksen lacks, and so really offers a perfect blend between a player like Fred and a player like Christian Eriksen, which I think would offer Ten Hag's central midfield perfect balance alongside Casemiro and Bruno Fernandes. Now in terms of price and wage package, all of these players will be expensive, which is why I did put them in a separate category. Two other players who are going to cost substantially less in terms of the transfer fee and not demand as high wages. But if we are looking at who will be the most expensive in terms of transfer fee, is going to probably be Jude Bellingham or Enzo Fernandez, who will cost in excess of £100 million. I would estimate around £105 million for Enzo Fernandez and around £110 million for Bellingham, which maybe given their age and their potential is a lot fairer at a price than maybe you'd first perceive. But Frankie de Jong as well is going to cost around 70 to probably 80 million pounds for United to sign. But he would probably demand a lot higher wages than Bellingham or Enzo Fernandez because he's on a massive wage already at Barcelona. Bellingham and Fernandez will probably demand between 250 to 300,000 pounds per week, which is still a lot, but still within United's budget, I'd say. But I do think Frankie de Jong's camp could command an extortionate wage package, as I reckon they probably want between 400,000 and 500,000 pounds per week. Barella would likely command around 70 to 75 million pounds, I'd say, and probably between 250k and 300k per week. And so you do have to bear that in mind with any new signing and how they will fit into the club, the context around their arrival. And I'll come on to that specifically with these 4 players in the next video when we look at my other options as well. So because I don't want to make this video extremely long, in a separate video I'm also going to go over some alternative central midfield options that are better value for money, and in that video I'll conclude who I actually think United should sign in central midfield, taking into account price, ability, age and stylistic suitability. That video should be out very soon, and if it is out I will leave it linked in the description so you can check that out to find out which of these 4 I would prefer. But before you watch the next video and get my answer, put your answer on who you'd prefer out of these 4 in the comment section below and let me know if I've missed any options.